I started doing some investigative documentary 18 or 19 years ago, mostly for the French public television. And I did some stories in country where there were not too much freedom of the press. I went also many times in Iraq and Kashmir and Israel. I did some conflict stories. And sometimes I was in that position of being a journalist coming from France who was able to do some local investigation that were very dangerous for journalists who were there, because it was about corruption, money laundering. It was a very sensitive issue, and because I was French, but it was way more easy for me to do some interviews with some person very exposed. And so I did that for 18 years, and something more personal in my life convinced me to do that. It happened actually in 2015. I was working in a production company, and we were right next to the Charlie Hebdo newsroom. There were just the newsroom just in front of my door, actually 1 meter. And so two terrorists of Al-Qaeda in Yemen arrived on January 7, 2015, and they arrived in the newsroom of Charlie, and they killed a lot of my colleagues and friends. And so that's I was used to see some difficult situation, to be in difficult situation, but this happened really in my personal environment, in the building where I was working, to people I know and to people that were doing exactly the same job than me. And for all of us in my company where I was working, we were of course very lucky to be alive. I arrived 2 minutes after the terrorist escape. I was the first to enter the newsroom. I did my best with other friends to help the people over there. And I tell that because it's for all of us it was of course very kind of big trauma. And from that day I really decided to think about what I can do as a journalist to keep the stories alive, to continue the work, but as a journalist and with the skills I have, I was not thinking about doing another thing than that. And so I started thinking about that, and there were, before that, some other, actually the idea is not new. OCCRP did a project called the Khadija Project, and it was about Khadija Project. It was about continuing the story of Khadija Ismailova, who was jailed in Baku, and many journalists from OCCRP did exactly the same thing. In 1976, in Arizona, Don Bowles, who was a reporter from Phoenix, one day wanted to meet one source, and he started his car, and there was an explosion. He was killed. And the day after, 30 or 40 journalists from all the country in the US decided to join together and to complete the stories of Don Bowles. And that's the beginning of the Arizona Project. And basically I decided to find the time to think about starting a non-profit really fully devoted to that, continuing the stories. So I went to the University of Michigan, spending 1 year over there with a fellowship. That was the perfect opportunity for me to having the time to do some research, creating a team, fundraising, finding partners, and then Daphne Caruana Galizia got killed in Malta. So we start right away, and with friends, colleagues, we decided to start the Daphne Project with Forbidden Stories. In partnership with OCCRP, with the New York Times, with Le Monde, with La Repubblica, 18 news organizations decided to join us. And so we complete that. And Forbidden Stories is about that, continuing the stories. But what we do, so because as we are talking about protecting stories, we try so to offer to at-risk journalists the possibility for them to protect their information, to protect their stories, as they are investigating. So that means that if they did an interview 2 days ago, a very sensitive interview of that local governor who might be corrupted, or they might get some evidence of his corruption, probably they are really at risk now before the publishing or right after the publishing. So what we can do now, I think in 2018, and what was not possible at the time of the Arizona project, is to think about how to protect the story and how to make a kind of backup of your information. And so if something happens to you, then we will be able to complete. And if you want, you can also say publicly that you already share with all the journalists the information you have. But it's really a decision case by case. Sometimes it could be a silly idea to say that. It depends on the country, it depends on the case. It's very complicated, of course. But this is what we just thought 1 year ago. And actually what is happening now, that there is, of course, so many violations of press freedom, so many threats against journalists, so many killings on all continents, that there is a lot of stories to protect. And the main DNA of Forbidden Stories is really to think about that if a journalist is dying for one story, is to think about that this story is probably very relevant to the public opinion. So, and usually journalists, when they got killed because they were working on very important stories. Most of the time it's about environment, human rights violations, corruption, money laundering, and so that's critical. So that's an organization with a very journalistic mission, making sure people get access to those critical stories.
You were talking about that the journalists that you work with, you give the people, you provide them with the resource or the tools to keep their sort of stories safe. Is it something like a secure drop?
Yeah, there is a
thing? So basically, when they approach the organisation, do they approach it when they're working on this beginning, when they're working on a story, or when they start to get into threats and they realise they're onto something that could be really important?
There is different kind of conversation actually. There is the main thing is that the more exposed journalists are working most of the time alone. Like in India on Facebook, they are not publishing on a newspaper; they are just publishing on their Facebook, but very important stories. And there are no newsroom because it's too dangerous, because the newsroom just closed 2 years ago because they received so many threats before. So in our newsroom in Paris, in London, in New York, we are used to get this conversation with the editor-in-chief before going in the dangerous zone or in dangerous meeting or during all along the process of the investigation. And we used to have that kind of conversation that, well, I received this call, it's strange, or well, I'm working on that file, or I received this leak and I know it's very sensitive, so we need to share with others, we need to talk, we need to let them know that we are several persons to get that leak. And so the journalists, the at-risk journalists we're talking about are working most of the time alone. So we need to recreate that kind of conversation. So after that, there are many tools they can use. We are proposing actually 3 tools: Signal, Secret Drop, and PGP email. But we receive also some basic calls or regular conversations. So we try to find some tools from the open sources environment, and to have a kind of the safer conversation we can have.